Well, hello, everyone. Welcome to this week's episode of the Writing and Resilience podcast. If you don't know me, my name is Lisa Cooper Ellison. I am a trauma informed coach and your resident story alchemist, and I am a Akashic record reader. And I am excited to be here with you today because we are going to talk about something that I have seen in my coaching practice over and over as a problem, as well as seeing it on social media. And it is the tale of two stories around one issue, and that issue is vulnerability. So let me set this up for a moment. I saw something online recently that I have seen in my coaching clients as well. And that is a writer who has worked really hard to craft their story, and they send it off to an editor, and the editor gives them the following feedback. This feels like it could be a compelling story. However, it is not raw enough. I don't feel like you've gotten underneath the surface of this story, and I need more details, or I need you to get to a rawer place in the work. Have you ever heard that? Has there ever been a point where someone shared that with you and it stopped you in your tracks? Or maybe you are the kind of writer who has heard this feedback. You have poured all of yourself into your project. You have shared every single detail of every heart-wrenching thing that has absolutely happened to you as it pertains to the story, and you send it off to an editor. And the first thing they start talking about is how brave you are, how courageous you are, how the material feels raw, and the vulnerability is really high. And yet they don't know what story you're trying to tell. You have a lot of high intensity, disparate situations that you have expertly rendered, but it's hard to say how they go together. All right, listeners, do you fall into that camp? Either way, I want you to put a comment on YouTube, or you can text the show and let me know, because I want to know if this is your experience. Because these are the two sides or the two poles of vulnerability that get writers in trouble. Welcome to Writing and Resilience, the podcast for writers who want to write and live the story that sets them free. I'm your host, Lisa Cooper Ellison, a writer, transformational and trauma-informed coach, story alchemist, and fellow traveler on the winding road of healing and creativity. Each week, I'll share tools, practices, and conversations that will help you let go of what no longer serves you as you create stories that change lives, especially your own. Together, we'll explore how to trust your creative voice, support your mental health and resilience, work with your nervous system and unique design, and stay connected to your deepest calling as a writer, even when life gets messy. It's time, my friends, to write and live the story that sets you free. I'm honored to walk that journey alongside you, one story and one episode at a time. So here's what we are going to talk about today, and that is, what is vulnerability? Why do writers get this wrong, especially when they're trying to create work for publication? And by the end of this video, you are going to know why you sometimes think your writing sucks, and yet it's the best thing you've ever written. So let's go ahead and get started with a definition. So this definition comes from Brené Brown. I love Brené Brown, just kind of saying that out loud. And I have had the privilege of working with Brené Brown. I took her Daring Greatly course back in 2015. And so I met with her online in a virtual community for almost 6 months. And this is one of the issues that we talked about, was how can we be vulnerable? And what does it mean to be vulnerable? And, for writers, it's really important to understand appropriate vulnerability when it comes to your work. So she shares 3 ingredients when it comes to vulnerability: uncertainty, risk, and emotional exposure. So when people hear this, they can think it means, oh, let it all hang out. And that's exactly what readers want. And that is not necessarily the case. We want to understand, what does uncertainty mean in terms of storytelling? What is the right level of risk, and what are you risking that feels appropriate to your audience? And then how do you handle emotional exposure so that you're not overexposing yourself or overwhelming your readers? So I'm going to talk about these 3 things just in general, and then we're going to talk about how they show up in these 2 poles, or these 2 kinds of problems that I have seen in my coaching practice and that I see writers complain about online. So number 1, uncertainty. We want to, as readers, wonder what's going to happen until the very last few pages. So, what is the thing that needs to be most uncertain? The narrator's big solution. So, we want to know that a big solution is coming. Some kind of transformation or change has taken place, especially in memoir, but we don't want to know what it is too soon. Because if we know and you're reminding us over and over again, hey, all's well that ends well, why should we keep reading your book? So, that's number one. Number two is risk. So, what do we need to risk? Well, a great book is going to say the quiet part out loud. It's the thing that we're all thinking, but we're afraid to say. And you're saying it in an effective way. And you're getting to something about your story that makes you feel uncomfortable. And it's not so much discomfort that you feel traumatized by what you've shared, but it's a level of discomfort that feels a little edgy. It feels like it's getting to a deeper level of truth than maybe you've allowed yourself to confront in the past. And so when it comes to emotional exposure, there are two things that are really important. We need to know how you felt, not just what happened. And most importantly, readers want to know how you coped. So that's what you want to think about in general. Now let's get to those two stories that I talked about, those two situations that people have. So on the not raw enough side, your work does not feel vulnerable enough. What's going on? When it comes to uncertainty, this is an issue. Remember, we want to know that the big solution is coming, but we don't want to know about it right away. I've seen writers fall into the trap where they're reflecting too much, especially in early chapters of their book. And they're reminding us again and again, there is this person who was broken, but me, the person with all the answers who's arrived, is sharing little snippets and insights along the way. Well, if we see too many of those, what you do is you lower the dramatic tension in your story. And then why in the world would we need to read it? So, what do you want to do? Pull back. Don't give so many hints. Don't make yourself seem like you've already arrived. Show us that vulnerability and a little of that brokenness. That's what readers are looking for. When it comes to risk, often what's happening is you're telling too much and you're showing too little. What do I mean by that? So, in writing, there's a concept called show, don't tell. When you're telling, you are reporting things. This happened, and then this happened, and then this happened in a summary style of way. Often, this summary style of writing is the rehearsed story that maybe you've told at dinner parties, you've told to yourself, you've told to your best friend. And so it feels kind of rehearsed because it is. And we all start there. So there's nothing wrong with starting there. It's just not enough. Something that can get you out of that space is showing. And the way we show in writing is through scenes. Scenes are cinematic moments that take place in a specific time and a specific place. And you write it with so many sensory details that the reader feels like they're right next to you walking through the situation. The more you do that, the more you let go of control of your story, which allows you to get underneath the surface. And then you will start getting to the quiet part or the things that people are all thinking but not saying. And we will see how that shows up in your specific story. And so when it comes to that emotional exposure piece, you probably know where I'm going already. If you're telling what's already been rehearsed and you're sharing it in a reportage style of way, there's not a lot of emotion in the work. We aren't seeing how you feel or how you felt. You're not sharing that quiet part out loud because you haven't gotten there yet. And we don't have any emotional exposure. Even if you say, I feel or I think in the story, there's something missing. So the more you can write in scene, the more you will learn how to insert those things into your story. Okay, that takes us to the other side, that other pole, that other story, which is I've written something so raw. I've given you all of the details. I have poured my heart out in a way that feels absolutely naked. And yet, you're not respecting the fact that I'm an artist, or you're telling me things like you've created all of these disparate scenes and each one is vivid and amazing on its own, but I just can't see how it goes together. And it's quite possible you don't see it too. So, what are you getting wrong? So, when it comes to that uncertainty piece, when you are sharing a lot of graphic details, and I'm going to give an example. So let's say, because this shows up a lot, especially in the memoir space, maybe you have an abusive parent and your parent is screaming and yelling at you and maybe even hitting you in this specific scene, and you share every single blow, every single horrid word, and we just see that scene and all its terror and all of its awfulness, but we don't see how your character is coping, we don't know what to do with it. And if it's so specific, if you're sharing so many details, it's possible that you're going to traumatize your reader, because when we are overwhelmed with details, we don't know what to do with them. We just take them in, and the nervous system begins activating in such a way that it's as if it's happening to you. Now, here's a way to think about it. Have you ever watched a movie where so much was happening again and again and again? You just felt dysregulated from watching it? Well, that's an example of what that can look like. I think movies in the action genre and also horror movies can do this, or any movie, psychological thrillers where it's like very high intensity and we go from moment to moment to moment. That's what it can feel like. So if you have too many graphic details without making sense of what happened, we're going to feel overwhelmed. So that leads to that risk piece. If you're oversharing, you're going to probably feel it, and your reader is going to feel it as well. And it's likely that you're sharing the wrong things, because readers don't need to know about every single hit or smack or every horrid word. They need to know about the smack or the words that led you to cope in a certain way, or develop a certain kind of belief, or take a certain kind of action. That's the piece that is the most important. And we want to make sure that as we're doing it, the reader is getting something out of it. And the thing that they want to get out of it is that sense making. They want to understand that you know what this is about, and that it's serving a certain purpose for the reader. And that gets to, what do readers want from your story? Number one, they want to feel like your problems are their problems in some kind of way. Not just that your story is so unique and so specific and so outlandish that you are the only person in the world who could relate to what happens, right? They want to feel like even if you have an outlandish, outrageous story, there's some theme in there that connects with themes they've dealt with. And the way that I talk about this a lot is to say that your story is a mirror for your reader's soul. I've said this for years, right? So when a reader picks up your book, whether it is a novel or a memoir or narrative nonfiction, they want to feel like they see some of themselves in that. It's the reason why you need to understand your audience, especially in the memoir space and a narrative nonfiction space. You need to understand, what are their problems, so that you can begin to think about, okay, how have I had their problems? How am I showing that in my book? And then how am I showing how I dealt with those things? Because that's number two. They want to see the decisions that you made. They do not want to see or read a book where the narrator is nothing but a victim, where all kinds of things are happening to them. Certainly, that may have been how it felt at the time. And if you are alive now to tell your story, you coped in some way to get out of that jam, whether that is to shut your feelings down or go along to get along, or any of the other things that we do that may or may not have been healthy in the long term, but were healthy back then. Fawning is one of them. And so if you want to know more about fawning, please check out my episode with Ingrid Clayton. That's about the fawning trauma response. But there are all these things that we did and ways that we operated that may have kept us safe, but now we're deconstructing them. We're looking at things in a different way. So you want to make sure that you understand what those decisions are around how you coped and how you behaved. And that if it's a complex form of coping, that we see how you got there. So here's an example of what I mean by that. I have read more than one book where someone has a strong meditation practice, and suddenly they are meditating and they are the inner witness. So the inner witness is this detached part of you that can see what's happening but isn't immersed in the experience. That's an advanced technique. And if you meditate for long enough, you will experience that. But if you're just a novice reader and you've never experienced that, you can't relate. So, how did you get there, and what struggles did you have along the way that allowed you to get to this place? Another example is, sometimes, especially this is very Gen X, you might have been told, just rub some dirt on it, or pick yourself up by your bootstraps, or quit crying or I'll give you something to cry about. You might have heard those things. Okay, So, what did you do in response? Did you keep crying? Did you stop crying? How did you stop crying? What did you do inside yourself to shut your emotions down? And again, these things are probably going to happen early in a book. Are they the healthiest ways of responding? Probably not, but you need to understand what those are so you can break them down and help the reader understand, because that is how you coped. And the more you show them how you coped, the more they get to live vicariously through you. Because especially if you're writing a memoir or if you're writing a novel, your reader doesn't want a 5-point plan from you about how to do these things. They want to watch you cope and change and deal so that they can take those strategies, the ones that will work for them, and implement them in their own lives. That's what they want. And that's why stories are so powerful. Okay, so we've talked about those 3 issues of uncertainty, risk, and emotional exposure. We've talked about what readers want. Now I want to give you some special things to think about. And this is a mantra style question. I want you to ask yourself again and again. And that is, am I confessing to my reader or am I confiding in them? I'm going to say that again because it's so important. Am I confessing to my reader or am I confiding in them? These 2 words might sound similar, but they have very different energy and they create a very different experience inside your reader. So if you're confessing, you're sharing what happened, often in that very graphic way. And what you're unconsciously asking the reader to do is 2 things. You want them to bear witness to your experience. You want them to see how awful it was, and you want them to tell you it's all okay, or you're all okay, or you're forgiven, right? You want the reader to give you something. And this is the hard part about being a writer. Readers aren't going to give you anything. You have to give it to yourself. So that means that there is a certain kind of work that you need to do on your manuscript so that you get to a point where you have some insights, you have those ahas that help you understand why each scene in your story matters and how it serves to create a breadcrumb trail of change that leads to the big aha, the big change, the big solution that happens towards the end of your book. And there's a lot of different writing techniques that you may need to go through, a lot of things you may want to consider. If this is something you're curious about, you can always leave a comment on YouTube and let me know, like, yeah, this is something I want to learn more about. And then I will add it to my list of things that I can share podcasts about. So for now, though, what I want you to know is that it's going to require you to step back, to do multiple drafts. And this is a quick exercise you can do that can help you get underneath the surface. You can say, this story is about ... answer that question. But what it's really about is ... When you know what it's really about, that's when you get to that confiding space. And then you can develop a sense of where you need to show those different ways that you coped and the different decisions that led to whatever the big aha is. All right. So now that you know that, here's what I want you to do. Whenever possible, write in scene. Remember, scenes are specific time and specific place, and they are written cinematically. When you do that, you will automatically get underneath the surface. And what can happen is that even if you aren't sure what's going on, if you have a trusted writing community that you work with, and I highly encourage you to have one, you will have readers that will ask you deeper and deeper questions, and they will be able to reflect those things that you didn't know that lead to that quiet part that you will end up saying out loud. That is that deepest level of vulnerability that is important to your readers. All right, so we've gone through a whole bunch about vulnerability. Now, this is the last thing that I want to share, and it is one of the most important things, and that is this. There are going to be times when you have written the best thing in your life and you are going to think it sucks. And your writing group is going to save your writing on the day that that happens. So I'm going to give you a little story. This is something that actually happened in a class that I'm teaching. And we do writing, and then people are sharing their work to get feedback. And someone shares something that just hammers through every single heart in the room. We are all blown away by what has been shared. And everyone reveals that to the author. And she says, "Oh my gosh, I can't believe you're saying this to me because I almost didn't read it to you. In fact, I almost crossed it out." And she almost crossed it out because she thought it sucked. It didn't matter. It wasn't important to her story. And yet, it was both critical and pivotal. So, why did this happen? Well, sometimes when you have been vulnerable in the very best possible way, you're going to have that sense of emotional exposure and that feeling of risk that is going to be really uncomfortable. You're going to have some discomfort around the experience. And it can be hard to deal with that, especially if you're writing about a difficult topic and you have a chain of emotions that goes like this: I feel discomfort. And from that discomfort, I feel like I've done something wrong, and maybe I am wrong. Therefore, I go to shame, right? So if your emotion chain leads you to shame, shame is going to make you think that your writing sucks. And so when that happens, your inner critic steps in, and your inner critic is going to shut that work down by telling you that it sucks. It's going to say things like, you should delete it. It doesn't matter. It's not good enough. That function of the inner critic, which again, it's trying to be helpful, it's trying to throw you a bone, even though it really isn't, is one of the reasons why I created my Ditch Your Inner Critic Now masterclass, because I wanted to give you some very quick, easy things you can do to shift your perspective right away. And so if that is something that speaks to you, you can go ahead and get your masterclass. It is a link in the show notes that you can go to, because that can save your work. And again, the other thing that can save your work is your writing group. And it's the reason why you want to have a writing group, because when we get overly vulnerable in a way that makes us feel uncomfortable and we're getting into that shame state, we need someone else to reflect what we do well. And that's where a really good, healthy writing group can step in and reflect what's going well. I'm so glad that the writers in this community were able to do that for this writer, because, well, I can't share that story because, the authors, and also I just can't wait for it to come out into the world so you get to read it. But I felt that so strongly. And I really needed those writers to step up and say, no, this is your best work. Because I know it's a trap that people fall into. And you know what? I've fallen into that trap too. And it's the reason why I have a writing group that I work with, because I know these things happen. And I know that it's so easy to sabotage yourself when you are a writer and you are truly trying to be an artist. So now that I've shared so much about vulnerability, I want to recap what we've done during this episode as we wrap up. So, number one, the first thing I want you to know is that in order to write well, you do have to be vulnerable. The thing that matters is that you're vulnerable in the right way, so that your work isn't in one of those two story places, right? The story of not raw enough or the story of too raw, but that you're sharing something that is in the middle. There is a sense of emotional exposure for you as the artist, but also for your reader, because you have gotten to those deep things that they also feel. And you are holding their hand by showing them how you coped and why you decided to do what you decided to do, and how it ultimately led to something different in your life. If you're feeling overly exposed, right? You are feeling incredibly naked and like you can't bear this material, or you're having physical symptoms, I want you to pause and take a break, because it's possible that you have struck the nerve of trauma and you need to come back to it. But also, if you're feeling that shame and you're wanting to throw it away and it doesn't feel way too out of bounds, give it to your writing group and ask them what they think, because you may find that the thing that you're telling yourself sucks is actually your very best work, and you want to make sure that you preserve it, because you know what? Readers are going to feel that too. Don't let shame get in the way. And whenever you are feeling overly exposed, if it feels like it's too much for your writing group, be sure to seek a therapist or to work with someone else, a coach who can help you understand what's going on so that you can regulate yourself and get back to your writing practice. So, That's it for vulnerability today. I know we've gone deep. We've talked about a lot of things. And I just want to thank you so much for listening. And I want you to know that if you're just learning to be vulnerable for your journal because you're trying to be your authentic self, you can use all of the things that I've talked about today to do that. And if you are trying to write and publish your work, you can apply every single one of these things to your story. And either way, I want you to know that as you do this work, whether it is personal or whether it is moving towards a profession, it will help you be your authentic self. You are going to open up to the story inside yourself that sets you free. And I am excited to see where that takes you. So I want you to keep working on your stories because they all matter and they all change the world. Peace, love, and blessings to all of you, my friends. Until next week, keep on writing because I am cheering you on. That's it for today's episode. Thank you so much for listening. I couldn't do this podcast without your support. If you love this episode, here are 3 simple ways that you can keep this show thriving. 1, subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or your favorite podcast platform so you never miss an episode. 2, leave a 5-star review so others can find the show. 3, join my engaged dynamic community by signing up for the Writing Your Resilience newsletter. As a thank you, you'll receive a free copy of Ditch Your Inner Critic, 5 tools to transform self-doubt into self-support. Until next time, remember that your story matters. As you write and connect with the truest, most authentic version, you become not just the writer, but the person you're meant to be. And that, my friends, is the real freedom writing can offer.